event that the Oxford Libertarians organized together with Capitox, the Banking, Finance, Investing, Actuaries and Consulting Society of the University of Oxford. We're very honored that we have a very distinguished speaker, Dr. Yaron Brook, amongst us. Dr. Yaron Brook is President and Executive Director of the Ayn Rand Institute in the United States, in I think Irvine, California.
Sure.
He's also a private equity fund manager. He runs a fund that invests primarily in banks, and he's going to talk about objectivism and about the morality of investing, answering the question whether it's moral to be an investor or not. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Yaron Brook.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. I was asked to talk about something that relates objectivism to the world of finance and the world of investing. So I thought I'd talk maybe a little broader than just the morality or the ethics of investing, but the morality and ethics of the whole sector, the whole financial sector. I think this is a good time to be talking about that, given the attitudes in the world right now. And it's interesting generally that when you look at history, and you look really over the last 2,000 years, attitudes towards finance, towards investing, towards bankers have been always repeatedly negative. This has a long history going back even to the Greeks, where usury, in other words interest, was viewed as somehow a corrupt activity. Giving out money and getting interest in return, making loans, was viewed as somehow a bad thing. It certainly picked up by the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages and really until the early part of the 20th century, where the perception was that usury was a mortal sin. You actually went to hell for being a banker. Dante puts bankers, I think, in the 7th or 8th rung of hell. I mean, they're pretty low down there. They're among the real scum of the earth. And I think many politicians and people today would sympathize with Dante's perception of banking. And it's been a repeated theme throughout history that usury, banking, finance, the kind of profits that are received through investing and through, God forbid, speculation, are viewed negatively, are viewed as immoral in some deep sense, are viewed as needing to be controlled. And I think it is no accident, for example, that of all the industries out there, of all the different segments of the economy, the most regulated industry is the financial industry. I mean, people talk about the free market failing during this crisis, and I'll be speaking actually tonight at the Oxford Union on why the financial crisis has not hurt capitalism. Quite the contrary, I think it's vindicated capitalism. And the reason is that there were no free markets 2 years ago before the financial crisis happened. So it couldn't have been free markets that failed. Something failed, but it certainly can't be free markets, because banking, mortgages, housing, all the segments that failed are all the most heavily regulated segments in the economy. So maybe it's the regulations that caused the crisis. And I'll talk in much more detail about that specifically tonight. But it doesn't surprise me that the bankers are being blamed for it. The Great Depression, today most economists who look at the data, who evaluate the Great Depression, identify the cause of the Great Depression as government policies. Federal Reserve policies in the United States, central banking policies in Great Britain, and then all the regulations and all the anti-trade legislation that was passed during that period that caused the Great Depression in the 1930s in the US and really in the entire world. Yet at the time, who was blamed for it? Bankers. FDR, Roosevelt, the U.S. president at the time, lambasted bankers for the Great Depression and yeah. And as a consequence of the Great Depression, who got regulated? What was most of the legislation that came out when FDR was elected president in the 1930s were banking regulations and regulations of the financial industry and splitting commercial investment banking
What happened to the farmers with the Great
Sorry.
How about I
she's
speak and there'll be a
first,
Q&A.
and then there'll be a Q&A
There'll be a
afterwards.
Q&A afterwards, and I'll be
Right,
happy to answer any questions you have.
Super, thank you.
So the bankers, financiers, anybody making a profit within the financial world has always been blamed for, for financial problems, for financial crises, even though every time we look back as historians, as economists, the blame almost always lies with government policy, with government programs, with central banking policy, with monetary and physical policy, and not with the private markets. And yet, it doesn't matter. Time and time and time again, it's always the private markets that are going to get the blame. And the current financial crisis is really no different. No different in that regard. So the question is, given all that, why? And there are really, I think, two possibilities here. One is that financial markets are actually, do function the way the critics describe them. That is that they are unproductive, they're parasitical, they don't add any real economic value, and that the critics are right. They might not be right about the particular financial crisis and so on, but that they're fundamentally right. There's something non-productive about this economy. Bankers are just leeches, and therefore the perception is true. And that's certainly one possibility. The second possibility is that they are productive, and that there's something else going on here that has nothing to do with economics, that has nothing to do with our perception, our understanding of actual economic policy. I think that's what's really going on. I'll get to that. But let me quickly clear up the question of whether bankers are productive or not, and whether financial markets and the financial industry generally, and financiers, investors included, but all the participants in the financial markets, whether that is a productive activity, whether that is a economic value add. Now I'm going to do this quickly. I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards about the particulars. I also assume that most of you already know the answer to this question or understand it, given that many of you belong to an investing club. I assume you know what you're doing. But
Certainly give an option.
Listen, I'm sorry.
Questions are later.
And would you please sit down if you want to listen for now?
I can stand and listen, thank you.
Well, okay, but any more distractions, and we'll have to ask you to leave.
No, I'm listening.
Okay.
Finances, in my view, may be one of the most productive activities in a free economy. Bankers are at the center of any productive economy. You cannot have a functioning productive economy without a thriving financial industry and without a thriving banking community and a banking industry. And indeed, if you look throughout history, the correlation between industrial, technological development, between the rise in standard of living, and between the development of the financial industry, that relationship is incredibly tight. It is no accident that banks really start thriving when the West starts being active again after centuries of real stagnation and deterioration. During the Renaissance, you start seeing the first remnants of banking coming out of Italy and coming out of Germany, and bankers starting to fund the large enterprises that are needed. Trade, which is one of the first things that happens during the Renaissance, to raise the standard of living across the world. That trade needs to be funded somehow. There's no way for that trade to exist without bankers, capitalists, financiers to make it all work. And of course, if you look later on in the 19th century, and the big banking houses throughout Europe, the financial markets, Lloyd's of London developing a whole insurance market, all to fund industrialization, all to fund trade, all to fund the advancement of a developing economy. And it's no accident that it happens here in England, that it happens in Europe, and it happens in the United States. Areas where, those areas in the world that never developed a sophisticated, real market, financial markets, have stagnated. have gone really nowhere. Going back to the financial industry, maybe one of the most obvious ways in which finance is productive is, if you look at the venture capital community in places like Silicon Valley in the U.S., where financiers are funding particular companies that then grow and create enormous value. And every household name that we have today in the technology industry, whether it's Intel or Cisco or Apple, were all needed financiers. Steve Jobs would have never gotten out of his garage if not for Sequoia Capital providing him with the financing to make his dream come true. And that is true of the technology industry, but that is true of shipping in the 19th century, that is true of the great factories of the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. None of the progress that we take for granted today, none of the values that we have today around us could exist without a functioning financial market. Even when you're just buying and selling stocks, assuming you're doing so intelligently and you're not just providing noise and liquidity to the market, which are values, at least the liquidity is a value in and of itself. But the very fact that you are trading based on your best estimate of the value of a particular company adds value economy-wide. It provides valuable information to producers, to the company itself, to competitors, to other participants in the financial markets, that is crucial to the smooth functioning of a free market. So every aspect of the financial industry serves a productive purpose. And they all generate, ultimately, a significantly higher standard of living. They all add to our well-being, to our material well-being. And yet, and again, we can spend hours just talking about that particular fact. I assume you know a lot of this stuff. But it isn't that hard to see it. It isn't that hard to grasp how, if you've read, I don't know if any of you have read the work of De Soto, Capital Ideas, where he talks about just the ability of somebody who owns a piece of land to take a mortgage out on that land, take that capital, invest it in a business. There's economic growth there, right there. There's economic growth, there's entrepreneurship, there's creation, all because somebody is willing to give a mortgage on private property. So the ability of financial markets to facilitate economic growth, to facilitate entrepreneurship, to facilitate growth and increased standard of living is amazing. It should be, bankers should be heroes. They should be, put up on pedestals. We should admire them, respect them, and thank them profusely for what they do. Instead, they are the villains. They are the devil himself. They are the ones that we want to cut their bonuses and reduce their pay and do everything we can in order to crush them. And yes, we tolerate them because in some sense everybody understands that they have a productive function, but we don't like it. Right? We really, really don't like it. It's something that we just, literally we tolerate rather than admire, respect, support, move forward. So the question is what? Here's this incredibly productive profession, incredibly productive segment in our economy, which is viewed with utter disdain, is heavily regulated. We don't trust them one iota. We've taken away even, the primary tool that banks have, the primary product that banks and finance and deals with is what? It's money, right? And it used to be that banks actually printed money. Now, it's a long time since that happened in the UK. But if you go back to the early part of the 19th century, in Scotland at least, there were private banks that issued private currency, and the currency used to say what bank they belonged to, and you could redeem that currency for gold. And in the United States, that system existed until 1914, where private banks issued private currency. But even that, you can't trust them, right? They're bankers. They're evil. They're bad. So even that was taken away from them by the creation in the United States of the Federal Reserve. And in the UK, the expansion of the powers of the Bank of England, ultimately taking over those banks in Scotland, taking away their ability to... And by the way, the history of banking in Scotland is truly fascinating. It's one of the great examples of successful private banking in history and worth looking into. So why? Why don't we trust them? Why do we regulate them? Why do we control them? Why do we need central banks to take a big chunk of what actual banks can do quite well? And I think the reason here is not economic. I think generally the text and capitalism have nothing to do with economics. We won the argument about capitalism a long time ago with economists like Hayek and von Mises and even Friedman, and there are lots of free market economists out there. They've got it. They've explained it. It's done. The Keynesians lost. They lost a long time ago from an economic perspective. Keynesianism doesn't work. Capitalism works. We've gone through many, many cycles that show that free market principles work in reality. Yet, nobody learns from experience. Nobody is willing to look back at those experiences and study them. We always revert to bigger government. We always revert to anti-free market principles, and we always revert to anti-banking, anti-free market principles. And the question is what? And I believe that the answer to that is that there's something about what we do in a free market that people find abhorrent, that people find distasteful. And this is particularly true, more so, in the financial markets than it is if you're in industry or if you're in software or if you're in technology. And that thing that we all engage in is self-interest. So what is capitalism about? Capitalism is about, companies trying to make what? Money, right? They're trying to make a profit. Right? For who? For society. They're trying to maximize society's utility. When Steve Jobs goes to work and, when he creates one of these iPhones and stuff, is he doing this to make me happy, you all happy, maximize happiness? No, he doesn't care. Right? He's doing this because he had a dream to make a beautiful product. This is a manifestation of his dream. He's a completely selfish bastard, right? His dream, not my dream. I would have made it blue. I don't know. His dream. And he wanted to make an awful lot of money because the profit margin on each one of these is well over 50%. He could have sold it to me at cost, right? It would have made me happier. But that's not what motivates him. What motivates him is his profit. What motivates him is his vision. It's his dream. He's being selfish. And the funny thing about it is when I went out and bought this, did I buy it to stimulate the economy? Right? Like our politicians would like us, go to the mall to stimulate the economy? No. I don't care about the economy in that sense. I'm not going to go spend my money to stimulate the economy. I bought this because it's really pretty. I bought this because it's really functional. It increases my personal productivity. It's good for me. I'm a completely selfish bastard in buying this. I'll put it like bastard, but I'm certainly selfish. Right? And we all are, right? When we go to work because we want to, because we want to make a lot of money, because we love the work that we do, hopefully. And when we go to the mall, or we go into a shop to buy stuff, we buy because we want to. It has nothing to do with other people. This is, Adam Smith recognized this in the 18th century. It's all about self-interest. But even Adam Smith viewed self-interest as suspect, as negative. It's a negative that the aggregate is a positive, but as an individual pursuing his self-interest was not a good thing from a moral, ethical perspective. And go and explain to people how lots of people doing bad things, in a sense, right, morally bad things, thinking overly of themselves, aggregates into something good. That's just not a persuasive argument. Because we're all taught by our philosophers here at Oxford, by philosophers everywhere, by our mothers, by our teachers, that selfishness, that self-interest, that pursuing one's own self-interest is evil, it's bad. Maybe it's not evil, maybe it's just neutral, but what's a moral ideal? What's heroic when it comes to morality? Self-sacrifice, self-denial, selflessness. Think of yourself last, your mothers must have told you, at least my mother told me. Right? Always think of other people first. And yet when we go into the marketplace and we act in the marketplace, we're thinking of ourselves first. And capitalism's all about that. Adam Smith showed it. The invisible hand works that way. We're all thinking about ourselves. But that creates real angst. That's a real problem. Morally, it's perceived as bad, but economically it seems to work. And that's the tension. That's the tension in our culture. Now think about bankers. Now, Steve Jobs has an easy relative to bankers because he can come out and say, but look at the product I provided all of you. Look how gorgeous it is, and look how happy you are. He can hide behind this box and pretend he didn't do this for selfish interest. He can say, I did it for all of you. And we all buy it because we've all got one of these and we like using it. So there's a certain credibility to that, even though it's BS. But what can a banker do? By providing capital to this and that, so, I make markets more efficient, and therefore the distribution of capital is more effective, and your standard of living ultimately goes up. I'm really in it for you. Nah, nobody buys that. It's too complicated. There's nothing to hide behind. I mean, basically what people see is money coming in, money going out, more money came in and went out. He made a profit, but nothing was created. Right? What do they call financiers? Paper shufflers? Because it's all about paper. There's no creation there. Nobody sees the creation. So everybody in the marketplace is, I think, self-interested for the most part. But most of them can deny it with some plausibility. Bankers can't. Bankers are just nakedly self-interested. They're nakedly selfish. They're in it for the buck. They're in it to make money, and they're very good at making lots of money.
Ouch, don't do that, that was my head.
Yeah.
It just happened to be in the wrong place. So, I think that the resentment against bankers, but the resentment really against capitalism per se, the resentment against free market, has its origins not in any economic issue, not in any economic principle, but has its origin in this ethical principle. The ethical principle that suggests that morality, that the good, that ideals are all about selflessness, are all about self-sacrifice, all about giving and all about sharing, and that self-interest is inherently bad or inherently, at best neutral. And as long as self-interest is bad, and we look out into the marketplace and observe people, we say, well, then capitalism must be bad, because capitalism is all about self-interest. We say that banking must be bad, because bankers are more self-interested, or appear more self-interested than the typical capitalist. So, our attitude towards self-interest is ultimately going to drive, and the culture's attitude towards self-interest is ultimately going to drive our economic perceptions. Our philosophical ideals, particularly in ethics, ultimately drive our economic ideas. So that if we believe in capitalism, those of us here in the room who do, believe in capitalism, the battle is not so much a battle about economics. Again, I think that battle was won a long time ago by really, really smart economists, much smarter than we are. The real battle that needs to be fought is an ethical battle. It's a battle about whether self-interest is morally valuable. And in my view, in Ayn Rand's view, I think Ayn Rand's real contribution to this battle is saying self-interest is what morality is about. Ayn Rand says that self-sacrifice is what's evil. Self-sacrifice is what's wrong. That the essence of morality is not about how you treat other people, but how you treat yourself. It's not about self-denial, but it's about self. It's about what you do with your own life. To her, the essence of morality is living the best life that you can be. And then the question that morality poses is, let's say you want to live a good life. But that is your motivation. Well, morality is that code of values that helps you to get there. It's the principles that are required to live a good life. And there should be principles. We're not, we are a particular type of biological animal. We have certain characteristics. We're not just mush in there. There are certain principles. Some things lead to good outcomes. Some things lead to bad outcomes. So we can figure out scientifically what are the things that lead to good outcomes and what are the things that lead to bad outcomes. She would say morality is the science that should study what leads to a successful life. What are the values that generate success? And if you think about it just a little bit, it doesn't take much. I think you discover that the primary human value, the most important thing that we as human beings do in order to be successful is what? From anything from the creation of this glass, to the water inside of it, to the food that we eat, to the clothes that we wear. There is one activity that we engage in that helps create all of that. And only one, in a fundamental sense. And that's our ability to think, our ability to reason, our ability, as Aristotle said, what makes human beings is our rational faculty. We are the rational animal. And if that's the case, then if you care about human progress, if you care about individual success, if you care about making the most out of your life, then the primary value for you is reason, is rational thought. And she described her ethics as rational self-interest, or rational selfishness. And people who pursue their own life rationally are heroes, are the good guys. People who try to make the best out of their own lives are the heroic people in society. Not the Mother Teresas, not the people who sacrifice their lives and give up everything for the sake of others. So it's a reversal of the common view of ethics. So the idea is, if you believe that your ethical purpose, that the purpose of your life is your own happiness, your own success, your own prosperity, fulfillment of your dreams, making the most out of your life, then what political system do you want to live under? Do you want to live under a political system that tells you how to live your life? What you can and cannot do? That restricts you left and right? That tells you what business ventures you can engage in and which you can't? No, nobody with any iota of self-esteem would want that. If you want to pursue your own life, then you want maximum opportunities. You want to be able to make your choices. You want to be able to fail, get up, succeed, but you want to be able to make the decisions for yourself because it's your life and that's the center. The whole idea of government telling you what and how to do is justified by what? By other people's well-being, never by yours. Right? It's either we know better what's good for you, which is a denunciation of your ability to take care of yourself, or you have to help us take care of those guys over there. But if you say, well, it's not my moral responsibility to take care of those guys over there, I can either do it or not, but that's my business, not yours, then you repudiate the whole basis for socialism and for government involvement in the economy. I want to be left alone to pursue my happiness my way. If I'm rational, if I'm successful, great. If I'm irrational, I'll fail. Hopefully I'll learn something from that. And if I don't learn from it, it's my problem, not yours. That is an ethical statement that I think is necessary in order for us to view capitalism as a positive, as a good political system, and therefore financiers, bankers, investors, as the true heroes that I think they are. And they're not heroes because they create jobs. They're not heroes that increase standard of living, and I mean, all those are good things, they're great. They're heroes because they take care of themselves. They're heroes because they're making a living by being productive, doing something that allows them to advance their own purposes. And for our perspective, as let's say, well, outside of the financial industry, they're making our lives better. So they're a great trading partner. Right? If you're really pursuing your own self-interest, then what you look for in interaction with other human beings is a trade. You're not looking for sacrifice. You're not looking for people to give you something for nothing. You're not looking to give somebody something for nothing. You're looking for opportunities to trade, because trades are win-win. When you go and buy an iPhone, I don't know, for $100, let's say, obviously Apple's making over 50% margins, so they're making a profit, but you're better off as well. Otherwise you wouldn't have given the $100 to get the iPhone. Apple's better off, you're better off. And all human interaction should be a win-win, a trading relationship. Sacrifice, self-sacrifice, the idea of living for other people is a lose-lose situation. Right? What does the word sacrifice mean? The word sacrifice means giving up something and not getting anything in return, or getting something of lesser value in return. It's the exact opposite of a trade. If you think of trade as win-win, a sacrifice is either lose-lose or lose-win or win-lose, but somebody has to be losing, otherwise where's the sacrifice, right? Where's the pain? Where's the suffering? There has to be something negative, a consequence, otherwise we wouldn't call it a sacrifice. Sacrifice, according to Rand, is the essence of evil. It's stepping away from life. Why lose? Why move away from your dreams, from your happiness, from your prosperity, from what life really means, from living the fullest life that you can live. So, the real battle, again, for markets, for capitalism, in my view, is exactly this. It's a battle about, is self-sacrifice a moral ideal? And if it is, then capitalism is dead. It will never be successful. It will never be successful politically. It will never manifest itself, and we're moving away from it because this notion of self-sacrifice, this notion of altruism, is only increasing in the societies we live in. Or is a morality consistent with capitalism? Can we convince enough people? Can we change the cultural attitude towards morality so that we get a morality that is consistent with capitalism? And the only morality consistent with capitalism is a morality of self-interest, a morality where each one of us is responsible for his own life and for his own happiness, and where your moral responsibility is to yourself and to living your life the best that you can live it. Thank you.